So hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today I'm gonna have, well, a speed review of my GPU collection. So over time, the channel exists for about a year now, and over all this time I have acquired a wide range of hardware and most notably graphics cards. And I think today I'm gonna make kind of a recap of what I got, what I did with the cards I have, what sort of plans I have, and what I think about them, basically. Yeah, so this only includes the more relevant cards. There are some that I just excluded because I have things like my GT240, which is literally just a display out. So yeah, that's not interesting. And yeah, so what you see before you right now is the main, my main display shelf of graphics cards. These are not all, by far, but what we have on here is my sorta nicer cards that I'm currently not modding. So yeah, things we have here is like this right over here. This is the GTX 980 Ti Strix, and this is actually, apart from the 2080 Ti in my daily system, the fastest card that I have. That doesn't mean it is really impressive though, it's just my only 980 Ti, and the next fastest thing I have is a 780 Ti, actually pre-780 Ti's. So yeah, this is the 980 Ti. The PCB is nice. I kinda like the card. I've tested it a bit and it does perform like a slightly overclocked GTX 1070, but it can't catch the GTX 1070 that I reviewed and overclocked at the beginning of the channel that my friend has now, because that 1070 is a rather golden one. Both core and memory do overclock pretty nicely. This 980 Ti right here, it's Hynix memory, so that's kind of a trend. Everything seemingly has Hynix for me, which is pretty much every 28nm card I have is Hynix. Yeah, so the memory on that is not the best. The core is also not the best. It's a 1445 MHz core, I think. Yeah, I've seen Maxwell cards pull 1600 MHz on air with a less substantial heatsink than this, and the ASIC quality is also not that great. The main reason why I have the card is to use it, because if I, what I do with my group of friends that you might be familiar with if you watch the other channel, I don't think you do, but it's just they're there in the videos. Yeah, so when we have a thing going where we try to visit each other, like have a meetup, at least once per year, also 2 times per year, depends on what we're doing. And yeah, since my internet is really bad, we are very likely not going to meet up at my place. I'm going to go somewhere, and that is at the other end of Germany, which is about 1,000 kilometers away, maybe less. And yeah, since my main rig, which includes the 2080 Ti, the 8700K, it's a pretty nice rig. At some point it was literally the fastest computer you could build, though it is custom water cooled and it has been very expensive. And yeah, I did bring it one time, and I had I drained the loop and put the coolant in a bottle, and that bottle leaked while I was in a train. And then also, yeah, since my graphics card is in a vertical mount, it's not really that greatly secured in the PC, and it's just, I've decided that I'm uncomfortable with moving the system any more than I have to, and also it's just a lot of work prepping it for transport, draining the loop, refilling the loop. So I decided I'm just gonna bring Kepler 18, my Ryzen system, because that thing can still game, and it can probably reach the same performance as my main rig, because I still use a 1080p monitor, which I'm trying to change but that's gonna take a long while because, well, I buy graphics cards, not monitors. So yeah, I use this 980 Ti Strix, which, as I've said, is about as fast as a slightly overclocked-ish 1070, which, yeah, it's not a 2080 Ti, but it's for 1080p, even 1440p, it's still a very, very fast, I would still call it high-end graphics card. The 1070, of course, is high-end. This 980 Ti, well, if you overclock it, you can get up to that speed, but it's gonna pull a lot of power at that point. So it's an aging high-end card, I would say. And yeah, so I'm not really doing much with it because I need it working, and yeah, whenever I go somewhere with a PC, I'm going to take this graphics card, put it into Kepler 18, and then take that PC around with me. There's no water cooling in there, the hardware is not that expensive. It's still a huge loss if something would break, but it's just that system is way easier to move, way less copper, way less, like, no water in there. Well, okay, there's an AIO on the CPU, but you know, it's a closed loop. And yeah, so that's what the 980 Ti is for. So yeah, that's also why there's not that much content on the channel with it. I don't plan to do any crazy things with it. A similar story is right next to it. That is the GTX 780 Ti Matrix. It looks very similar. The PCB is also very similar, though the power stages are different. And yeah, so this is just a matrix. It is not a matrix platinum, which means you do not have the guarantee to get a good core on this. And yeah, the core on that thing is also not the best. It is kind of weird. Sometimes it clocks really, really high, to a point where I would say it is indeed golden, but sometimes it just craps out at clocks that are even lower than my reference 780 Ti. This card really, really scales with cold. And my matrix is not the only one. So recently the YouTuber David Does Tech Stuff made a video where he also got a 780 Ti Matrix Platinum. So his one is a Platinum, mine is not. But the PCB is the same, it's just the Platinum has a guaranteed binned core that is good for overclocking. And yeah, he also ran into some weirdness with his card and also saw that the card scales a whole lot with cold. So yeah, I haven't really observed that much cold scaling on Kepler, but the Matrix really, really likes it cold. And I have now two matrices that I know like it cold. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Matrix. I also don't really want to do anything crazy with it, even though it is designed for extreme overclocking. And I still want to run it on LN2 someday, but I don't want to kind of destroy the PCB with capacitors and volt mods and all that. I want to keep it as it is mostly. And that's pretty much just because the Matrix, it is a wonderful PCB. I really like the PCB, and I mean, it is a Matrix, it's in the name. The PCB is pretty similar to the Strix right here, but the Matrix is a Matrix, and it's like it's ASUS's Kingpin edition basically. And yeah, so I really wanna, I like the card more as a collection piece than really as a thing to do stuff with. So yeah, that's also why for now I'm not really doing anything with the card. I am willing to do some more stuff with it, it's just no hard modding for now. And then, right next to that one, we have my favorite graphics card of all that I have. This is the GTX, also 780 Ti, Windforce. So, yeah, this graphics card, if you look at it, it doesn't really look that spectacular compared to the Matrix, and it is. The cooler is pretty good. The cooler is legitimately very strong on this, but the PCB is basically it's a reference PCB with an upgraded VCore VRM in the sense that you have 8 phases instead of 6. But apart from that, it's pretty much a reference PCB. And yeah, you also get 2 8-pins for power, where you get an 8-pin and a 6-pin on the reference card. But that's pretty much it. That's the differences from the PCB. So why do I like this card so much? Well, this card absolutely destroys the Matrix. Why? The core on this card is pure gold. This is the best 780 Ti I have, and this actually was my daily card for over 4 years. And I really like this card. It is my favorite graphics card of all the cards that I have. And yeah. And I mean, when I got this card, I made a commitment. I said I'm going to run this card until it dies. And yeah, I have done that. I have indeed run it until it died. The card is currently not really functional because, well, after the more than 4 years of daily gaming, in January 2019, one of the memory modules finally kicked the bucket, and the memory degraded a lot. It can't run stuck clocks anymore. I briefly managed to fix the card, sort of, by flashing a custom BIOS onto it that locked the memory to 500 megahertz from 3.6 gigahertz. So the performance took a huge hit, and it basically performs like a GTX 580 now when it runs, because the memory is so very degraded, sometimes it doesn't even run that. So to fix the card, to rescue the very good core in it, yeah, it's gonna need a complete replacement of all the memory chips. I can't do that on my own. I'm gonna have to ask a repair shop to replace all of those memory chips. But I do want to do that at some point. I absolutely love this card, and the core in it, like the core on it ran 1320 megahertz stock voltage. Like completely stock voltage. You don't touch it. It ran 1320 megahertz. The Matrix can touch 1320 megahertz, but I never got it stable, and it needs full voltage, like completely cranked voltage, to even start a benchmark with that clock. So yeah, that's how good this core is. Like, I know of Kingpin edition cards that needed mods to reach 1320 megahertz, and this card does it just stock, just by itself. And yeah, so that's why I absolutely love this card. It is amazing. Yeah, and pretty much the only reason why I don't run it daily in Kepler 18 is, well, it's not working really. So I have my other 780 Ti actually in it as the standard solution. We're gonna get to that later. But first, let's look at the other cards that we have here. So here we have one of the less spectacular cards that I have. This is an Radeon RX 570 Expedition, 4 gigabyte. And the reason why I have this card is pretty much just, at the time my WindForce died, I already had the 2080 Ti that I'm using now, like, bought. I already had paid for it, but the shipping and availability at that time was so bad. We had we went to different retailers, and I don't know if it was 2 or 3 retailers canceled our order because they just couldn't get the card. And then the 3rd or 4th time we tried, we actually got the card. And that took several months to get the card. And I was sitting there without a graphics card. So yeah, I decided to take some emergency money that I have and get the cheapest card that I can find that will be a decent replacement for the short time that I'm gonna have it, and that was the RX 470 Expedition. Yeah, I paid 150 euros for it at the time, which was it was the cheapest RX 470 I could find. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the theme for the card. It's cheap, it's very cheap, it can't really overclock because the power limit and also the VRM on it is very, very weak. But I ran it stock actually. I didn't overclock it when I ran it daily. And yeah, I mean, it performed decent. It was okay, because at the time I played mostly PlanetSide and GTA 5, which are older titles. I played Ark on it, that didn't go so well. Ark really hammered this card, and I had to reduce the graphics settings rather significantly. But for the time I had it, for the about 2 months I had it, it was a decent card. I enjoyed the time I had with it. It was the first time I ever ran an AMD card. I ran an ATI card way back when I was 10 years old, but this is the first AMD card, and yes, I got a taste at the AMD drivers. They are as bad as the people say, but yeah, it all in all, it was a decent card. And yeah, for a long time I had it in Zora's Alpha, which was the predecessor to Kepler 18, and I had it, yeah, just for gaming on that machine. I had it folding for a time, and yeah, after that, well, really didn't do much with it. I have used it for rendering videos, actually, because it is actually it is exactly as fast as the 780 Ti I have in Kepler 18, because I use that machine to render videos, because the 8-core CPU unit is better at rendering than the 6-core in my daily. And when rendering videos, the bottleneck I run into is actually just RAM. So yeah, I can, since I use GPU acceleration for rendering, I can use pretty much every graphics card that I want, because the bottleneck is RAM, very, very severely RAM. And yeah, so a reason why I would want to run the RX 470 rendering is just it consumes less power than a 780 Ti. But currently I'm not doing it because just I do not like the drivers. So when I do other stuff with Kepler 18, I just like the 780 Ti I have in it. So then we get further to the little thing in the middle right here. That is a Zephyr HD 7770. It is not the same HD 7770 that I once reviewed, because that card actually died. This is a replacement for it. It is pretty similar. When it comes to the PCB, there are slight layout changes, and then there's one bigger thing, which is actually this is running dual-sided memory. This has 8 instead of 4 memory chips. It's still a 1 gig. It still has 1 gigs of VRAM, not 2. So these memory chips just have half the capacity that you would get on a normal HD 7770. And yeah, so the side effect of having more memory chips sadly is that they overclock worse, because if you have twice as many memory chips, your chances to have a bad one that doesn't overclock well is twice as high. And sadly, this card is really, really not good for overclocking. The one that died had a pretty good core and okayish memory. This one has a bad core and really bad memory, and that's pretty much why I haven't made a single video about it. It's just the card is really really a pain. And yeah, so before I can do anything exciting with it, I'm gonna have to mod it, and yeah, I'm gonna have to do that eventually. Right now it's really hot and I really don't feel like doing anything. I'm just playing Destiny 2 all day. That's just I play games mostly right now, because it's just so very hot, and if I try to do serious work and I try to concentrate, it's just way too hot. I absolutely hate heat. I need it cold. I need 18 degrees Celsius, not more. That's actually the optimal temperature for me. Yeah, and now where it is 25 to 32 degrees outside, and also in my room, because I have a PC going in it with a water cooling loop that's very efficient at blasting all the heat that it generates into my room. Yeah, it's not good. It's not going great. Yeah, but that's pretty much it for the 7770. It's not that great. And then we get to my two GTX 580s. So the first one right here is the GTX 580 Direct CO2 or DCU2. This is actually the first card that I bought with the intention to just overclock it, to just have fun with it. All the cards that I had before, like the RX 70, my Windforce, were actually cards that I used daily. This was the first card that I wanted to overclock. And, well, it's the only card I ever ran sub-ambient. Well, sub-ambient, sub-ambient with the chilled water loop. Sadly, Fermi doesn't really scale with cold. At least it didn't when I ran it. I was pretty inexperienced by then. So yeah, this card, I kinda like it. The VRAM is a lot more powerful than a reference 580 VRAM, but it is also very, very inefficient. The MOSFETs have a lot of RDS on, and the VRAM heatsink, it is really big and it gets really hot. The VRAM really needs this heatsink. And the heatsink for it is not great. If you really wanna push the card, you have to run it on water. With the air heatsink, as you see it now, it does 900 megahertz and runs really, really, really damn hot. If you water cool it, you can run 10-25 megahertz over a gigahertz, and that's pretty good. It's not the highest clock I ever got out of a Fermi card, but it's still pretty good. Yeah, and then the memory on it is so all my Fermi cards, literally every single one of my Fermi cards is Samsung, and the memory on this is actually quite good, but there's an issue. The same issue is also on all other ASUS cards that I have, and that is because that ASUS doesn't bother with VRM heatsinks, and that is actually a very big problem, because the Direct CO2, it doesn't have memory cooling, and the Samsung memory that you have on Fermi really likes it cold, at least colder than it would be without a heatsink. So if you do not chill the water loop it's on, or put a decent VRM heatsink on it, the memory will go to 23-25 megahertz, but if you cool it down properly, it will run 26-75 megahertz. That is a huge increase. And ASUS just kind of throws that out of the window because it doesn't bother with heatsinks, and yeah, that kind of annoys me. And it even gets worse when we get to the next GTX 580 right here, which is the GTX 580 Lightning. Have I spelled that correctly? I hope. Yeah, so this is another one of the, like the Matrix, it is a extreme overclocking card. And in terms of ASIC quality, the ASIC quality of these both cards, the cores on these two cards, they are less than 1% apart. And on air, they really clock the same. The only difference is the MSI heatsink is a lot more capable. So if you spin up the fans, and my Google just activated, why did you do that? So if you spin up the fans, the heatsink performs a lot better, and the card has VRAM heatsinks. So this card on air just beats the Direct CO2. I haven't run it on water yet, but I would expect on water it would be about the same. Maybe better in the memory, because the memory heatsink is probably compatible with the water block. But yeah, I actually haven't done that much with the card, because again, like the Matrix, it's also kind of a collection piece, because it's a Lightning, it's an extreme overclocking card, and I really don't want to risk it with stupid modifications, which is why the Direct CO2 is there. So yeah, and that's pretty much the cards on the main shelf that I have. So let's get to the other cards that I have somewhere in my room right now on my desk, and here I put them all together. So these are the cards that are active duty, except for that one. So yeah, these are the cards that I am working on. So there's a lot of content about these actually, about me modding it and testing them, benchmarking them, and whatever. So first let's take a look at the card that doesn't really belong there. It's just I didn't have any more space on the on the main shelf. So yeah, this here HD 7950, it just kinda went somewhere else. And as you can see, it has no fans, because this card is not in that great of a condition. So I got it like this, without fans. I did tape some other fans on it for a while, but I took them off recently, because I reassembled that heatsink that I got the fans from. So right now it doesn't have fans. And it also can't run right now, because the VRM has a blown high side MOSFET. So one of the 6 phases is out. It's actually not a problem. It failed open, so the card just runs, but with 5 phases. Now the problem is there is literally no airflow around the VRM, because this heatsink is a vapor chamber, and there is also no thermopad on the VRM, which means the VRM will it just will overheat and shut down the card. And yeah, I have no replacement thermopad for this, so gonna have to get one eventually, and then I can run the card actually properly. I kinda did test the clock of the core in the brief time that I had before it shut down. The core on it is actually pretty good. It's a 1250 MHz plus core, and yeah, so I heard for Tahiti that's pretty good. So yeah, I really look forward to run this card one day. And now we get to the ones that I did at least some modifications to. So here we have the GTX 480, not 580. This is a reference card. It also came in a really poor condition, even worse than the 7950. And it still works. It's just the fan didn't work, the heatsink was really mostly destroyed actually. And it was dirty, and capacitors were missing, and yeah. Pretty much the only mod that I did to it, well, 2 mods. I put some power bridges on the back, which right now they don't really do anything. And then the more visible modification that I made, that I also made a dedicated video about, is that I put this Arctic Accelero Plus heatsink on it, while keeping the base plate. You can see it here. There's still the base plate on there. And for that I had to modify the base plate a bit. I say it in the video. And that's pretty much that for the GTX 480, because yeah, it's not really that exciting for me. The core is not really good. The memory I actually didn't test, and it's just, yeah, it's a reference PCB, and the core is not that great, so it's not really that interesting to me. And then we get to the 3 cards that are really interesting to me. So first we have the 560 Ti 448. That card has a very complicated history with me. I did make several videos about this, because this card died and came back so many times. And this is the card I did my first hard mod on, which was a voltage sense line. And yeah, I also modded this more and more as time goes on. And this card is actually my best Fermi GPU. I ran 1150 MHz on this with water, and 1100 MHz with air. This core is very good. This is really good. The problem is just, well, the card kinda randomly dies sometimes. Because I don't know what, but something with mounting pressure. The card likes a specific amount of mounting pressure to work. If you don't give it that, it will artifact and not run. And yeah, I mean, this card has gone through a lot of modifications, and the back of it looks really, really disgusting. Yeah, this is the first card I ever modded, and I had a lot of fun with this card, and yeah. I mean, I did some mods to it that I didn't show, but it's not really that exciting. So maybe I'm gonna figure out something to do with the card, and then I can do more. And then we have the next two cards. This is a GTX 460 reference, and this is, as I've said in the video about it, this is basically just a proof of concept card where I try mods and look what they do. Because this card is, well, the VRM on it is kinda notoriously weak, and at some point I'm gonna inevitably blow up the VRM and kill the card in the process. And yeah, I mean, I got this for $6, so yeah, whatever. This is pretty much a test subject for me. So you can kind of see, I deleted the card. I put Plastidip around the core because I was kind of thinking about putting liquid metal on the core and between the IHS and run the stock cooler with it and see what happens. So for that I put, well, Plastidip over all the SMD parts around the core. Then you can see right here, that's the memory volt mod, and then you can kind of see a capacitor peaking from the back. Yeah, I mean, also did some heavy mods to this card. Also made a dedicated video about it. And this is kind of where I discovered that this card, like, it picked up a lot of extra clocks with capacitors. This card really, really, really liked the extra capacitors I put on it. Yeah, so it was kind of fun to mod. It's a nice, small, simple PCB, and yeah, it's just, these are really cheap. Like, if you wanna try to figure out mods and you don't wanna get like a GT 710 or something that's so low power that the PCB is so simple that you can basically apply nothing that you learn on that card to a higher end card, just get it something like a GTX 460. These are still pretty cheap, but you get, I mean, these were performance segment. These were mid-range performance cards back then. And the PCB, it is, if you get the reference card like me, it's still very, very weak, but it does have pretty much all the things that a high-end card will have, just weaker. And yeah, so if you wanna try, if you wanna learn volt mods, just get a 460 or something. These are very easy. Like, the memory volt mod was the easiest thing I ever did. The cap mods were also very easy. vCore, you don't even have to volt mod, you can use a custom BIOS for this. So yeah, and I mean, deleting the card also very easy. And yeah, I mean, this weird mounting hole spacing is kind of something that could stop you. But the thing is, the Arctic heatsinks, so like this one right here, just not the Plus, the Extreme 4, I have another one of these. That one fits actually this mounting spacing. And I don't know, I'm not so sure about if the Morpheus fits it. I don't think so, but the Arctic heatsink does. So if you need better cooling, you can just get one of these, or you just build yourself a custom loop like I did and drill holes into the block so it fits. Yeah, and then we have here the GTX 670. Oh, I forgot to write the names down on these. Well, here we have the GTX 670 for the win from EVGA. And this card is really interesting. I really like this card. I actually like it so much that I want to run it for scores on HWBot. And yeah, so the thing with the card is the core is pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's good. And it has Samsung memory. This is the only high-end 28nm card that I have that has not Hynix memory. This has Samsung. And this memory overclocks really, really good. I ran the memory on this card faster than a 780 Ti. And this is a 670. So this is not only a generation older, it was not even the flagship model of that generation. And I mean, you can see from how the power connectors are oriented right here, this was a blower card, and the PCB is not amazing, but it performs really good. So the core is 1280 megahertz, and the memory is, I don't remember the actual clock, but it was plus 775. So yeah. I also did cap mods to this one, but sadly here it didn't really care that much. The core picked up a little bit, the memory nothing. But I mean, it was already pretty fast. So the next step would be to do a volt mod on this, and basically I just have to do it. There's nothing keeping me from doing it, so I'm just gonna have to do the volt mod for this, and then we can see. Yeah, and then we get to the cards that I'm kind of using now, or like just some other random cards. So this is the other 780 Ti right here. This is the, yeah, it's a Zotac amp edition, but actually it's just a reference PCB with Zotac's cooler on it. And this card, well, this is the 780 Ti that I did some things with. I didn't do hard mods, but I did some BIOS flashing. So this card is running the Kingpin BIOS, which disables the power limit. It enables voltage up to 1.3 volts. And yeah, with that the card is actually running a lot faster than before. So with the stock BIOS, I barely could get it above 1150 megahertz, just because the power limit was so aggressive, and I couldn't give it any voltage. And then with the Kingpin BIOS, standard, I just run it 1.2 volts because I didn't see any scaling from 1.2 to 1.3. But the removed power limit gives it a lot of extra headroom. So this core can run 1267, 1280 megahertz depending on how hot it is. So this is also pretty, it's not like my WindForce, but it's still impressive. It's still pretty fast. So like I heard people call the 780 Ti as golden with 1250 megahertz. This one is faster than that. So yeah, by their definition this would be golden. By my definition it's good, not really golden. Golden would be 1300 megahertz plus. So yeah. And yeah, as you can see, it is in Kepler 18 right now. You can also see the extra memory stick I put in for rendering. Yeah, this is basically the standard GPU for Kepler 18, and yeah, I mean I run it. It still has pretty decent performance. With the shroud removed like this, the temps are also actually pretty nice, and yeah, it's just I kind of like it, even though the PCB is not that great. But I like this card, and yeah. Oh, then we get to this one. This is almost an irrelevant card. I just wanted to include it because this is where it all started for me. This is the graphics card from my first gaming PC. This is the GTX 650. And yeah, this is my first gaming graphics card. I did have a PC before that, but it was just like an old PC that I got from my grandpa when he died. This is the graphics card that I had with my first gaming PC, which was basically just Zoros Alpha and then this GPU. I did try to overclock it. I actually flashed a custom BIOS onto it to just kind of look at what it can do. And the core also is 1267, 1280 something. I kind of expected something more than that because this GPU only has 384 cores, which is against the 2880 cores of a 780 Ti, this is nothing. And if you have less cores, there's less of a chance you're gonna have bad cores that don't overclock that well. So the less cores you have, the better of an overclock you would expect in terms of clocks. And you can also see that, like, if you look at the stock frequency of an RTX 2080 and a 2080 Ti, you will see the 2080 Ti runs a lower clock because, well, it has a lot more cores. So yeah, the overclock is, I mean, it's mostly because just it has more cores and doesn't need that high overclock to run well, and so it's a power draw thing, but theoretically having more cores gives you a higher chance of having cores that don't overclock that great. Kinda like with the VRAM thing on the HD 7770. Yeah, and this card has a repeater memory. It's bad, really bad, and yeah, it's kind of just like, this is my first graphics card and this is why I include it. And yeah, here we get to the last card. This is another 7770. This is the card that died. I already said that this overclocked pretty well. Just yeah, it's dead now, and I turn it into a wall ornament that I have hanging above the shelf with the GPUs that you saw at the beginning. And yeah, so if I had a wall of shame, I would hang it up there together with some other stuff. Yeah, it's just this card, like, it got me to 9th place worldwide for 7770s in Firestrike. So this without any mods was already pretty fast. It's just, yeah, I did a dedicated video about this. This card kinda was weird from the start, and it, yeah, very, very quickly turned into a problem, and subsequently the card just died. And yeah, then I got the other 7770 and lost the Silicon Lottery in both memory and core. And that's it. Pretty much, these are all the relevant cards that I have. It's quite a lot of cards. It's a lot of cards, and I actually got another one in shipping right now, a GTX 460 Hawk, but that one's untested, so it might be dead. It's just untested. So if it works, I'm gonna have a 460 that is much, much better than this crap right here. So yeah. And yeah, that's pretty much a quick overview of all the cards that I have, what I kind of think about them, what I did with them. So kind of, if I would have to list favorites, it would be the Wind Force, the Matrix, the Lightning, the Strix, the 670 for the win, and then kinda also together with this card right here. And then after that it kinda gets hard to say. But yeah, so these are the cards that I got and played with, and yeah, so these are a lot of cards, and honestly I shouldn't complain about not having anything to do. It's basically just I end up with things like the Matrix and the Lightning, where just like, this card is too nice to do something with it. And then the Direct CO2 is like, the PWM controller has no public datasheet, and the VRM heatsink needs the backplate to stay on, so I can't really do cap mods, and blah 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 blah. And yeah. And the video is already way too long by now, so I think I'm just gonna put an end to it right here. Thank you all for watching, hope you enjoyed this rambly video about my toys, basically. And see you next time. Goodbye.